Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at two regions that you might not think have much in common, the Amazon Basin and the Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin. But stick with us because even though they're on opposite sides of the world.
They actually offer some fascinating insights into how humans and the environment, well, how they interact and the challenges they both face.
So much diversity out
It
there.
really is remarkable.
Okay, let's jump right in. First up, the Amazon Basin. If you can picture South America and then right smack on the equator.
That's where you'll find it.
Okay.
It's this massive area, and it's pretty much the definition of tropical.
Yeah, and that location right there on the equator, I mean, that really dictates everything, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. From the constant heat and humidity to the crazy rainfall. I mean, this is the largest river basin in the world for a reason.
Yeah, that's got to be a huge change for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah.
I mean, constant rain and humidity that just kind of sticks to you.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique experience. Now, all that rain creates something incredible. Have you ever heard of the Amazon River?
I think so.
Well, it's just this incredible force of nature fed by tons of smaller rivers called tributaries that all come together. It drains an area covering like a bunch of different countries.
Wow. I've heard the name Amazon itself as a pretty cool backstory. Something about women warriors, right?
Yeah. So the story goes that when European explorers first got to the Amazon, they ran into these fierce women warriors.
Oh, wow.
And those women reminded them of the legendary Amazons from, Greek mythology, and the name stuck.
What a story.
Yes.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've got this massive river system cutting through the world's biggest rainforest. That's got to make for a pretty unique environment, right?
Oh, yeah. The Amazon rainforest is so dense that sunlight barely even reaches the ground.
Right.
It's like this dimly lit, humid world, teeming with life, and the air is just filled with the sounds of the jungle.
So what kind of plants can even survive in a place like that?
Well, nature's pretty ingenious. You've got some really unique plants down there, like orchids.
Oh, yeah, they're beautiful.
They are. They've
Yeah.
adapted to the shade really well. And then there are these plants called bromeliads.
Bromeliads. Those don't sound familiar.
So picture this, a plant that basically creates its own little world.
What?
Yeah, they have these leaves that overlap, and they form these little pools that collect rainwater.
So cool.
And those pools become like mini ecosystems. They're home to all sorts of tiny creatures. And get this, frogs even lay their eggs in them.
Wow, so it's like an ecosystem within an ecosystem.
Exactly. It's amazing. What about the animals, though?
Oh, yeah, we can't forget about them.
Yeah.
What's lurking in the shadows?
The Amazon is known for its biodiversity, and the animals are no exception. Think bright-colored macaws, toucans with those giant beaks, hummingbirds zipping around.
But it's super loud in there.
Oh, yeah. The sounds of the rainforest are incredible. But it's not just birds. You've got monkeys swinging through the trees, sloths moving super slow tapirs looking for food on the forest floor. And of course, you can't forget about the reptiles.
You were going to say snakes, weren't you?
Maybe. There are tons of snakes in the Amazon, from huge anacondas and boa constrictors to all kinds of other ones, some dangerous, some not.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got piranhas in the river.
Okay, I'm never swimming in the Amazon, that's for sure. But it's amazing how one area can have so much life.
The Amazon basin is a great example of how resilient our planet is.
Okay, so we've talked about plants and animals, but what about people? I imagine they're pretty connected to this environment, right?
Oh, totally. The indigenous people of the Amazon have lived in harmony with the rainforest for a really long time. Their lives are completely intertwined with it.
So what's daily life like for them?
Well, traditionally, the men would focus on hunting and fishing.
Makes sense.
They've got this deep knowledge of the forest that helps them provide for their families. And the women, they're crucial in making sure everyone has enough to eat.
That makes them pretty important.
Oh, they are. They cultivate crops in these small clearings they make in the forest.
What kind of crops grow in the rainforest?
Think tapioca, pineapple, sweet potato. Stuff that thrives in that humid climate.
That's interesting. I've heard of this technique they use called slash and burn. Sounds kind of intense.
It's a powerful technique for sure, but it's really about balance, utilizing the land and respecting it. Basically, they cut and burn vegetation in a very controlled way to release nutrients into the soil.
Okay.
Then they plant their crops. But here's the important part. They don't just stay in one place forever.
So they don't completely destroy the forest.
Right. After a few years, when the soil isn't as good anymore, they move to a new spot and let the forest grow back in the old one.
So the forest is kind of breathing, expanding, and contracting as they move around.
It's a really cool adaptation to their environment. What about their houses, though? I bet they're pretty unique, too.
I bet they are.
Some of them live in beehive-shaped houses with these thatched roofs, which are perfect for the climate, and others live in larger communal houses called maloca.
Maloka.
Yeah, they have really steep roofs to help with all that rain. It's like their architecture is based on their understanding of nature.
That's amazing. But I'm guessing it's not always easy keeping that balance, right?
Sadly, no. The indigenous people of the Amazon are facing more and more challenges.
I bet deforestation's a big one.
It is. The Trans-Amazonian Highway was built to help open up the rainforest for development, but it's had some unintended consequences.
Like what?
Well, it's made it easier for logging operations to get into the rainforest, which has led to a lot more deforestation.
And that's bad for a lot of reasons.
It destroys habitats and forces indigenous communities to move from their homes.
What a shame. Is there anything being done to help them?
There are groups and people working hard to raise awareness about this stuff. They're fighting for indigenous rights and trying to promote ways of developing the rainforest without destroying it.
That's good to hear. But before we move on, I'd love to hear more about the big picture effects of deforestation. It's not just an Amazon problem, right?
You're exactly right. The Amazon rainforest is super important for regulating the climate.
Oh, really? How?
All those trees absorb tons of carbon dioxide, which helps to slow down climate change.
So when we lose the trees, we're not just hurting the local communities and the plants and animals, we're hurting the whole planet.
Exactly. It's all connected. What happens in one part of the world can have a big impact on other parts. It's like a call to action for all of us to think about the choices we make and to support policies that protect these important ecosystems.
That's a lot to think about, but fascinating nonetheless. Okay, we've spent some time in the Amazon now. Let's shift gears to the Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin. It sounds like another wild ride.
Well, it is. We're going to trade the rainforests for plains, mountains, and a river system that supports a ton of people.
Can't wait. Sounds like a totally different world.
Oh, it is. So from those Amazon rainforests, we're heading over to the Indian subcontinent, to a region shaped by two of Asia's most powerful rivers, the Ganga and the Brahmaputra.
Okay, so we're trading in the dense canopy for vast open plains.
Yeah, it's a completely different scene. Imagine these fertile plains stretching as far as you can see, fed by these massive rivers. But it's not all flat. You've got the Himalayas in the north, with those incredible snow-capped peaks, and then where the rivers meet the Bay of Bengal, you have the Sundarbans Delta.
The Sundarbans Delta? What that?
It's one of the biggest mangrove forests anywhere. It's this really unique ecosystem where freshwater and saltwater mix. It's super diverse. You've got Bengal tigers, saltwater crocodiles, all kinds of birds. It's amazing.
Sounds like a place I need to visit.
Yeah.
You also mentioned something about oxbow lakes before. What are those exactly?
Oh, they're these cool crescent-shaped lakes that form when a river changes its course. Basically, it leaves behind a loop that gets cut off and becomes a lake.
Oh, that's neat. So we've got mountains, plains, a delta, and these oxbow lakes. What about the climate? Is it as hot and humid as the Amazon?
It's a different kind of heat. This region has a subtropical climate, so it has real seasons. You get the monsoon season from June to September with tons of rain, and then you have hot summers and pretty mild winters.
Wow, so diverse.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the people who live there? How do they adapt to all these different environments?
Well, the environment has a huge impact on their lives. In the mountains where it's really hard to live, you find small communities and remote villages. But down in the plains where the land is fertile, it's one of the most densely populated places in the world.
Makes sense. The plains must be a draw for people looking to make a living off the land. What do most people do there?
Agriculture for sure. The soil is amazing and there's plenty of water, so it's a perfect spot for farming. Rice is the main crop. It grows really well in all that rain. But they grow other stuff too. Wheat, maize, sorghum, gram, millets, and even cash crops like sugarcane and jute.
So many different crops. Is there any variation in what they grow across the region?
Definitely. You'll find banana plantations in some areas. And in West Bengal and Assam, there are tons of tea plantations covering the hills. And in some parts of Bihar and Assam, they produce silk.
It's fascinating how people adapt and figure out how to grow what works best in their specific area.
Yeah.
You mentioned those gentler mountain slopes earlier. I can't imagine farming is easy there.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. They've developed this technique called terrace farming. They basically carve steps into the hillsides to create flat land for farming.
Terrace farming. That's incredible.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about the plants and animals. I bet this region is just as diverse as the Amazon, just in different ways.
You got it. The Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin has a ton of different ecosystems, so you get a really wide variety of plants and animals. In the plains, there are tropical deciduous forests.
Deciduous, so the trees lose their leaves.
Right, they lose their leaves in the dry season. You've got tiksal and peepal trees. It's pretty different from the Amazon rainforest.
What about the Brahmaputra Plain? What grows there?
Lots of bamboo. You can find these thick bamboo groves all over.
That sounds so cool.
It is. And then in the Sundarbans Delta, you've got those mangrove forests. Their roots grow right into the shifting sands. They're really important for protecting the coastline from erosion.
Mangroves are fascinating. And what about higher up in the mountains? What kind of trees grow in the cooler areas?
Up in the cooler areas of Uttarakhand, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh, you'll find coniferous forests. Those are the ones with pine deodar and fir trees.
So many different kinds of forests. Okay, so diverse forests mean diverse wildlife, right?
Exactly. The Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin is teeming with wildlife. You might see elephants walking through the forest or even tigers.
Tigers.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What other animals live there?
Oh, you'll see deer monkeys. And in the Brahmaputra Plain, you can find the one-horned rhinoceros.
One-horned rhino. Never heard of that one.
They're pretty rare, sadly, but there are conservation efforts to protect them. And what about the Sundarbans Delta? We already talked about the Bengal tigers there, but what else lives with them?
Good question.
Yeah.
What else is down in the delta?
Well, there are crocodiles lurking in the water and a ton of different birds. It's a great spot for bird watching.
So much to see. Okay, so we've talked about all this amazing life, but with so many people living in this region, are there challenges to keeping things balanced between humans and the environment?
That's a great question. And yeah, there are some challenges. Pollution is a big one.
I can imagine, with all those big cities along the Ganga.
Right. Cities like Allahabad, Kanpur, Varanasi, Lucknow, Patna, and Kolkata, they've all put a lot of pressure on the river.
So urbanization is impacting the river's ecosystem. What are some of the biggest issues?
A lot of wastewater from towns and industries gets dumped into the river without being treated, and that pollutes the water and hurts the animals and plants that live there.
That's awful.
Yeah.
And it's probably not good for the people who depend on the river for drinking water either.
Nope, not at all. Are there any specific animals that are particularly vulnerable to this pollution?
Yeah, like in the Amazon, we talked about the piranhas.
Yeah.
Are there any creatures in the Ganga-Brahmaputra basin that are really struggling?
There's this really unique creature called the susu, or the blind dolphin.
A blind dolphin.
What? Yeah, they live in the Ganga and Brahmaputra rivers, and they're blind.
Wow. How do they even survive?
They use echolocation. They send out sounds and use the echoes to figure out where things are. It's pretty incredible, but they're endangered and pollution is a big threat to them.
So sad. Their presence or absence must tell us a lot about the health of the river.
It definitely does. They're like a symbol of the balance between humans and nature. And their struggle shows just how important it is to protect our rivers.
I agree. Are there any efforts to clean up the rivers and help the Susu?
The Indian government has some initiatives like the Swachh Bharat mission, which is about improving sanitation and reducing waste.
Okay.
And then there's the Namami Ganj program, which is specifically about cleaning and conserving the Ganga. They're building wastewater treatment plants and trying to educate people about the problem.
That's great to hear. It sounds like they're taking this seriously.
Yeah.
But it can't be all doom and gloom, right? What about the good stuff? What about transportation travel and all the things that make this region so vibrant?
You're right. It's important to see the whole picture. The Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin has an amazing transportation network. There are roads all over connecting the cities and towns.
Okay.
The railways are really important too. And of course, the rivers themselves are like highways. Especially the Ganga boats have been traveling up and down it for centuries.
Sounds like a mix of old and new.
Yeah.
And I bet those rivers are popular with tourists too.
Oh, yeah. The Ganga is especially important for Hindus. Millions of people make pilgrimages to its banks every year.
It's amazing how religion, culture, and the environment are all connected there. What else draws tourists to the Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin?
Well, there are those iconic monuments like the Taj Mahal and the place where the Ganga and Yamuna rivers meet at Allahabad. That's a really sacred site for Hindus. And there's the Kumbh Mela, which is one of the largest religious gatherings in the world.
It's a region filled with history, spirituality, and beauty.
What about natural wonders? Are there any national parks or anything like that?
There are some incredible wildlife sanctuaries like Kaziranga and Manas. They're home to endangered species like the one-horned rhino and the Bengal tiger.
Wow, I would love to see those animals in the wild. And what about culture? Are there any unique traditions or experiences that tourists might enjoy?
This region is a mix of so many different cultures. It's really diverse. In the northeastern states, you can find some amazing tribal cultures, like in Arunachal Pradesh. They have colorful festivals and dances. It's really special. It sounds like an incredible place to visit. Okay, so we've talked about the environment, the people, and the culture, but I'd love to hear more about the people who actually live there. We've talked in general, but I'm curious about individual stories. something to really bring this region to life.
You're right. Personal stories are so important. And I have a great one. It's about a fisherman named Binod. He lives in Matwaliman village in Bihar.
Okay. What's so special about Binod?
Binod's story is all about resilience, resourcefulness, and respect for the environment. He and some other fishermen in his village saw that their local oxbow lake was becoming polluted and overgrown, so they decided to do something about it.
That's awesome. So they just took matters into their own hands. What do?
They cleaned up the lake, got rid of all the weeds and debris, and worked to make the water cleaner. But they didn't stop there. They decided to start raising fish in the lake.
So they were helping the environment and creating a way to make a living at the same time.
Exactly. It was a win-win, and it worked. They brought the lake back to life, and the fish they raised were really successful. But Binod didn't stop there. He decided to use the land around the lake to grow crops, too.
So smart. He was making sure he had multiple ways to support himself.
He's a really resourceful guy, and he and his community are doing really well. They're showing that taking care of the environment and having a successful business can go together.
That's a really inspiring story. It gives me hope.
Yeah.
But are there any challenges to their success?
There are. As the towns nearby grow, there's always a risk of pollution getting into the lake, and developers are starting to eye the land around the lake. It's a constant battle to protect what they've built.
That's the challenge everywhere, right? Trying to balance development with protecting the environment. What specific threats are they facing?
The biggest concern is wastewater from the towns getting into the lake and polluting it. They're also dealing with developers who want to buy up the land.
It sounds like a tough situation, but Binod and his community seem determined to find solutions.
They are. They're working hard to teach people about responsible waste management and sustainable development. They're also advocating for stronger environmental regulations.
It's inspiring to see people fighting for what they believe in and trying to make a difference. It sounds like Binod's story has a lot to teach us.
It does. It shows the power of individual action and how even small groups of people can create positive change. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in protecting our planet.
I love how Binod's story really brings it all home. It shows that these issues are real and they're happening right now. It makes you think about all the choices we make and how they impact the world around us.
It really does. And it's interesting because even though the Amazon and the Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin are so far apart, they're both dealing with the same challenge of how to balance what humans need with protecting the environment.
Yeah, we've talked about deforestation in the Amazon and pollution in the Ganga-Brahmaputra Basin, both caused by people trying to meet their needs. But it's not just about those specific places, right? It's bigger than that.
Right, deforestation in the Amazon. It affects the whole world's climate. I mean, it can change weather patterns and contribute to rising temperatures everywhere.
So what happens in one place can really affect everyone else. That's a lot of responsibility.
It is. And it makes you think about what role each of us plays in all of this. What choices can we make in our own lives to help create a more sustainable future?
Yeah, that's a good question to think about. So we've seen the amazing things about these two regions, but also the challenges they face. What do you think is the most important thing we've learned?
I think it's the resilience of nature and of people, too. We've seen how life finds a way to survive and even thrive in some really tough conditions. And we've seen people like Binod who are working so hard to make things better even when it's hard.
It's inspiring. It shows that even small actions can have a big impact and that there's always hope.
Exactly. We've talked about sustainable agriculture, responsible waste management, protecting rivers and forests. All of these things are important. But it's not just about big things. It's also about the little choices we make every day.
Like what?
What we buy, the energy we use, how we get rid of our trash. Everything we do has an impact. And if we start thinking about those choices, we can all help make things better.
So it's about understanding that we're all connected to each other and to the environment.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive into these two incredible basins, we hope you'll keep learning and exploring.
There's so much more to discover about these places. And we hope you'll be inspired by stories like Binod's.
And most importantly, we hope you'll think about your own role in creating a more sustainable future for all of us.
It's a journey we're all taking together. And every step matters.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive.
And we hope you've learned something new about our amazing planet. And that you'll keep exploring and learning and working towards a better future for everyone.